Mustering all his remaining strength, the ox-driver wrenched the creature's head to one side and gave it a hard twist. Cacus's neck was broken. He thrashed and convulsed. The huge weight of his body slipped from the ox-driver's grasp. He tumbled to the ground with his head cocked at an impossible angle and his limbs akimbo. Utterly exhausted, the ox-driver dropped to his knees, fighting back nausea and gasping for breath. His vision was blurred. Flies buzzed in his ears. The dog, wide awake now, suddenly arrived at a gallop, barking ferociously and baring his fangs at the sight of the corpse. He pounced atop the limp body of Cacus, stood stiffly upright, perked his ears, and alerted the people of the Roma with a long howl of triumph.
Hello there. That was a little clip from Stephen Saylor's historical novel Roma. It was the fight between Cacus and who the Romans came to see as Hercules. In Saylor's novel, he takes a more practical look at the myths and legends of the founding of Rome. And he has a large, strong ox driver fighting and killing the even larger, but malformed and hideous-looking, as well as cannibalistic Cacus, who was at one time a child chased from his village. But over time spent in the wilderness, Cacus had made his way into the lands of the Roma and started to terrorize the people living in the settlement that was nestled amongst the hills that were beside a river. He had been living in a small cave on the side of the Palatine Hill, where one day the ox driver came to town and, well, you heard how it ended for Cacus. Well, I was surprised to find out that the Romans actually did believe that Hercules had come to what would become Rome and founded an altar. Some believe the first and oldest altar that was ever erected in the geographic area that would become the city of Rome. It was apparently a generation before the Trojan War that the demigod Hercules had come to the Italian peninsula and completed his 10th labor out of 12, which was retrieving the cattle of Geryon and bringing them back to the court of Ruthius. Well, the Romans believed that when Hercules was herding these cattle, he drove them right over the Aventine Hill. And while he napped one day, Cacus crept up and stole some of the beasts and brought them back to his cave. But when Hercules awoke and began to drive his cattle past the cave of Cacus, the animals began to moo out to one another, making Hercules realize he was missing some of them. A fight ensues, and he beats Cacus to death, and right on the spot where he does so, it's said that he erected an altar and also taught two families on how to worship him and give sacrifice to him there. These two families were the Pinarii and the Potitii. Now, these two families are the main focus of Stephen Saylor's book, Roma. He chronicles the lives of various members of the family from before Rome was even founded, all the way up to the times of Octavian. And again, I was very surprised to find out that both of these families actually did exist. I assumed that he had just created two fictional families to, kind of help take us through the founding of Rome and its first couple of centuries. But no, the Potitii and the Pinarii were real Roman patrician families that existed even before the times of Romulus. Their family histories are intertwined with the legend of Hercules coming to Italy. It said Hercules was received by both the Pinarii and Potitii clans, and that he taught them both a form of worship and gave them the special rites to honor him at a yearly feast. The Pinarii had apparently shown up late to this first feast, and Hercules punished them by making them the subordinate position in the cult, not allowing them to partake in the entrails of the sacrificed animal, which to me is like, wait, not having to eat the guts of a cow is a bad thing, but we're talking about a time period where if people sacrificed a cow or something, they would eat every little thing and, not be grossed out by eating the innards of an animal. Now, the cult of Hercules, it's actually said to be one of, if not the earliest cult that popped up in the area of what would become Rome, and the great altar of Hercules would stand in the Forum Boarium, right on the spot where, again, he slew Cacus, up until the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. Another was constructed after and is said to have stood until sometime in the 400s AD. The Potitia, and Pinarii families held the hereditary priesthoods this whole time, or most of the time. This was something that the Romans called sacrum gentilicium, or the sacred duties of a family. In the beginning of Rome and through the Republic, this was something that the well-off families would do. They would erect an altar or a temple and dedicate it to a particular deity. And then that family would take over the priesthoods of what would now kind of become like a cult, like the cult of Hercules. This would give the family a huge amount of social standing amongst the other Romans and put them above their peers. It was kind of a look at us, we're the special people to this god. This god chose us to worship them and to make sacrifices to them, and for generations, these families would be in control of that god or that deity's cult. Well, at least there in Rome. It got so ridiculous towards the end of the Republic and even into the Empire, where anybody who ever did anything, or basically every emperor after their death, got deified and a cult was started for them. Again, like the cult of Caesar. Now, for a long time, this is how the various priests and other religious positions were dealt with. The wealthy families of the area would be in charge of, or jointly in charge of, the upkeep of different temples and altars, as well as be responsible for teaching the younger generations of their families about the proper rites and rituals and sacrifices of whichever cult they were going to be the head priests of. This in turn would give them a higher social standing amongst the people. But when the Roman state really started to take shape, many of the hereditary priesthoods and other family-held temples and altars, they were given over to the state to handle. In most cases, the family who held these positions, sometimes for hundreds of years, they would be paid off, and sometimes they would actually say no and continue to be responsible for the temple or altar their family claimed. This is what happened with the Potitii and the Pinarii families. The Potitii, they were a patrician family that was possibly as old as the city of Rome itself. Well, in the year 312 BC, the censor of Rome, Appius Claudius Caecus, went to the heads of the two families in charge of the altar of Hercules, and he offered them 50,000 pounds of copper if they would give up their sacred rites and instruct public slaves on how to properly sacrifice and worship Hercules. Now, the Potitia, they accepted this offer, and the legend goes that for their impiety, Hercules sent down a plague that cursed the Potitia clan, and within 30 days, the entire family was gone. 30 grown men and 12 full families were wiped out, while Claudius himself went blind. This legend could have some truth to it, because in the year 292 BC, there was a plague that hit Rome, and it very well could have wiped out an entire family. As for the Pinarii clan, they refused the offer, actually. Their family is actually thought to be older than the founding of Rome. They have members that are attested to under the kings of Rome, and they continue to be an influential and powerful family all the way into the times of the Empire. It was in the year 489 BC that Publius Pinarius Mamercinus Rufus held the consulship, and the famous Cicero actually refers to a statue of one of the family members being struck by lightning in the year 65 BC. While there is another mention of a family member being put to death by Augustus. And the last we see of the Pinarii family was a consul suffectus named Gnaeus Pinarius Cornelius Severus in 112 AD. As for the great altar of Hercules, like most other pagan sites, it was destroyed or built over by those damn early Christians. Some believe that the base of the altar can actually still be seen under the Santa Maria Cosmedine. As you can see in this picture, the two Roman columns that were incorporated into the walls and the entrance, so it could very well be a possibility that underneath this church was where the great altar of Hercules stood for hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's all I got for this video. Sorry it's a little quick one here. I just thought it was really cool to learn that the families that I've been following through Roman history in the novel series were actually real families in history that very well could have experienced some of the things that they do in the books. If you're interested in listening to the summary of those books, you can check out the videos. I have the first one up. Should have like the second one up sometime this week too as well. And as well, I think if anybody's wondering, the Great Samnite War is coming. That's still in the works. And hopefully, not next week, but the week after, we have another very long history video. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that little quick Roman history video. And have a good one.